All right, hello, and welcome to our podcast on the Electoral College. This kind of goes with our other podcasts where we were talking about liberal and conservative, and we'll also go ahead and introduce a couple more terms that fit on your student outline, and also some other vocabulary that will help us get into our next book, which is the play Inherit the Wind. So let's go ahead and figure out what we're talking about here. So to begin, let's go ahead and do a little exercise here, and this is a little bit out of context right now, but as we go through, I think you'll be able to see some connections being made. So here is that map with some of the larger population centers labeled. You can see over on the right-hand side, it has the names of those cities and then the numbers that correspond with them. So you can see New York City, number 1 in the upper right, LA, bottom left, Chicago, kind of middle top, Houston, Philadelphia, Phoenix, San Antonio, San Diego, Dallas, etc. We could go on and label some of the other major metropolitan areas. You're going to have the Milwaukee, Madison area up in Wisconsin. You're going to have Detroit, which is listed over there as number 10. You're going to have the Minneapolis-St. Paul Twin Cities. I think kind of in the middle of that big white blob in the middle, you're going to see the Denver, Boulder, Colorado Springs area. And then a little bit farther west, probably the Salt Lake, Park City area in Utah. So depending on your criteria of major population areas, these are going to be your bigger ones, but there are certainly second-tier cities that are a little bit smaller. But the point of this is the darker the red, the more populous. So in your mind, just kind of picture where those major population centers are, and that's going to indicate that there's going to be a lot of people living there. And then contrast that with the white area kind of down the left third of the nation. That's going to be a lot of agricultural space, a lot of desert, and in effect, we don't have a lot of people there. So it seems a little out of context right this minute, but go ahead and think about this map and be ready to come back to this a little bit later. So what exactly is the Electoral College? First off, it is not a place. It is not a university that you can apply to once you graduate from high school, but it is a group of people that help to elect our president. So to explain, when you go in and cast a vote for the office of president, you are not casting it directly into that person's bin. There's kind of a filter in the way that filters the popular vote. And by popular, we don't mean like, oh, they're like so popular, like everybody likes them. We mean popular as in directly from the people. When we're voting for president, it is not a direct vote. The popular vote is used to help shape the Electoral College. And then those electoral votes filter up, and that's what elects the president. If you think state by state that the candidate who wins 50% plus one vote of the popular vote, meaning of the people, then that candidate will receive all of the electoral votes from that state. This is called a winner-take-all system. So your individual vote does matter. It's just that it isn't directly mattering. It is going into the Electoral College filter. So if 50% plus one person vote for, let's say, Obama, then Obama would win all of the electoral votes of that state. And then all the electoral votes get counted up, and whoever has at least 270 of those would win the presidency. So before we get to the how 270 is the magic number that you need to win, how does each state get their number of electors figured out? Well, the equation goes like this. Since every state has 2 senators, we have that number 2. And then we take each state's number of House of Representatives members and add it to 2. So for example, right now, Colorado has 9 electoral votes. That comes from the number of 2 senators plus 7 House of Representatives members. That's how we get 9 for the state of Colorado for right now. So think about this. If you have states that have large populations, and therefore they have large numbers of representatives in Congress, they are going to have a lot of electoral power. So kind of going back to that original map we showed you, some of the states that have large metropolitan city areas, they're going to have a lot of people, they're going to have a lot of representatives, they're going to have a lot of electoral power. So some states like California, Texas, New York, Illinois, Florida, Ohio have a lot of big cities in them, have a lot of people, they're going to have a lot of electoral power. On this slide, you can see the electoral vote count of all states in the Union. And so if we were to overlay this with our population map that we looked at before, you would see that most of the states that have large cities in them also have large electoral vote counts or a lot of power in the Electoral College, meaning these are the states that candidates want to win. They want to get 50% plus 1 of the popular vote. Therefore, they would win all of the electoral votes. For example, California has 55 electoral votes. That comes from the fact that they have 2 senators and 53 representatives in Congress. So their magic number is 55. This is the most populous state in our union. Therefore, it has the most electoral power. Republican, Democrat, Socialist, Communist, Green Party candidates, everybody wants to win a state like California. Therefore, you're going to see a lot of political ads in states like this. You're going to see a lot of visits from the candidates because all candidates want to win these large states that have a lot of electoral power. And so you can see here, California, Texas, Florida across the South, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, even Virginia and North Carolina tend to have a lot of pull in the Electoral College. And that's not based on size or geography of the state, that's based on population, because more population equals more representatives equals more electoral power. On the flip side, you see a state like Alaska. They are geographically humongous, but since there are like 5 people and a moose in Alaska, it has very low population, it has very little electoral power, and therefore you can see it has the minimum, 3 electoral votes. So despite its size, Alaska has very little electoral power. And so how do we even figure out how many electoral votes are needed to win? Well, we have to look at the total number of electors. And that comes from 435, which is the number of representatives we have in Congress, 100 that we have in the Senate, and then District of Columbia gets 3 more. So the grand total of electors that are out there that can be won is 538. And so in order to get half of that, or a majority, you need 270 of those. And so that's kind of the magic number that you're going to see thrown around in presidential elections, and you're going to hear this said a lot, that any candidate needs 270 to win. And yes, that overall number has changed throughout history. It has been recalculated as more states were added to the union back in the day when we were adding more states. And those number of electoral votes may shift. As the population centers shift in America due to people changing for jobs, for environment, for whatever, those electoral vote numbers may change or will change also. For example, in the last couple of years, we have seen a lot of people leave states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan because of a lack of jobs, and they're heading to other states like Arizona, Colorado, California. And so when the census happens, which by the Constitution is every 10 years, and people are recounted, if we see that fewer people are living in Ohio, some of their electoral votes will be taken away because they're going to have less population, less representatives, and therefore less electors. But those electors need to go somewhere. If the population has moved west, maybe a state like Colorado would gain another House of Representatives member and therefore another electoral vote. And in fact, that is what has happened. Over the last 20 years, Colorado has gone from 7 votes to 9 votes in the Electoral College because more people have joined our state. So there is the question of what happens if no one gets 270? And this is always possible because even though you go in and you say, okay, well, there's probably the Republican and the Democratic candidate, the real ballot has a lot of people that are running for president. And so it is possible that one of the 2 major parties does not get 270 because of maybe a third party, maybe a fourth party was very powerful that year. And so if this happens by our Constitution, then the election gets thrown into the House of Representatives, where each state delegation is given 1 vote. I would also assume that the District of Columbia gets a vote, so we have an uneven number. And so if this happens and no one candidate gets 270, it goes to the House of Representatives, where each state casts 1 vote for somebody to win. Now, this has happened twice, back in 1800 and in 1824, where neither candidate won 270 votes, so it went to the House of Representatives. They decided who won, and you can see Jefferson defeated John Adams in 1800, and then John Quincy Adams defeated Andrew Jackson by this method in 1824. So it hasn't happened in the modern era. I can't imagine it's going to happen unless some sort of third party becomes exceptionally powerful in the next couple of years. But just in case, the Constitution does allow for this to happen, because at some point we need a winner. So that's pretty much in terms of how the Electoral College works at a fundamental level. Things to remember: the popular vote does not directly elect the president. It kind of gets filtered through the Electoral College. And so whichever candidate wins 50% plus one of the popular votes wins all of the electoral votes. Whichever candidate gets 270 of those electoral votes wins the presidency. If somebody does not win 270, the election can be decided by the House of Representatives. It's only happened twice, probably not likely going to happen in the near future, but the Constitution does provide for that. So that's it in terms of how the Electoral College works. If you have questions on that, as always, go ahead and bring those into class. We'll make sure we get those answered for you, and we'll go from there. So, thanks for listening.